There is a dynamic amongst married couples that I think we all should take heed to. One of the biggest things that we hear about is how to operate as a team. Now, operating as a team can mean a couple of things, right? Is what it sounds like, being a team, being on each other's side. But in reality, if anybody's ever played a sport or been a part of any type of team, then you know for a fact that all your teammates are not your friends and your friends are not your teammates. So what happens in a marriage when your teammate is not your friend and then your friend is not your teammate? Because there's an ebb and flow when it comes down to the ramifications of a marriage, consequences, things that we go through, things that we face as far as men and women. The biggest thing that I like to tackle is the factor of how men can become better leaders in their household, in the sense of being able to not only be a dictator, but be somebody who is the leader without words and the leader with words, right? Because one of the things that we look at when it comes down to men is the factor of action. Now, we talk about leading with action. Leading with action means that you're able to speak on what you're saying, speak on what you're doing, and do on what you speak. Whether that be something that you talk to yourself about internally, or whether it be something that you talk to yourself about out loud, or it be an instruction that you're giving to your household. The fact is, how does a man become a better leader? How does a man become something that a woman wants to follow? I personally believe that it has a lot more so to do with the person that they choose to be with than it has to do with them as a being, because one of the things that it sounds like I'm asking a man to be right now is perfect, and we all know that ain't gonna happen. The fact is, when it comes down to the breath of a man into the life of his lady, it has more so to do with the factor of how he lives his life outside of her versus how she lives her life with him, or how she guides him or directs him. Now, when it comes down to being a team, right, being a unit, it has more so to do with the factor of understanding that teammates understand the other's job. They understand the other's abilities. They understand the other's weaknesses. They understand everything about the other person versus understanding anything else than that. They really do give into the idea that each other need each other, and without each other, they are nothing. They understand that there's a common goal. But what happens when you begin to sacrifice said happiness within self for the common good of the team? Is there a need for the check of ego? Is there a need for the check of mentality, spirituality, anything of that nature? I, for one, do not know every answer, but I do understand one thing. When it comes to operating as a team, there has to be an ebb and flow of the lack of ego. Checking your ego at the door is one of the biggest things that helps the team to flow. Why? Because when pride becomes a part of the relationship, then pride will be the fall of the relationship. There is no such thing as perfection. There's also no such thing as making it without the other. You cannot do anything alone. If you look around this earth, everything that you do or believe that you do by yourself is not something that you do by yourself. There's help there. There's some type of aid. You can't even make your breath smell good without the making of toothpaste. If you don't make toothpaste yourself, then you technically didn't do it alone. And if you make toothpaste by yourself, then the ingredients that you use in order to create said toothpaste also didn't come from you, because everything depends on something else. The fact is, it may seem as if the ground works against the seed, because once the seed becomes buried, it takes it a tough time to work through the ground, but the ground does give in order for the seed to make its way through said dirt. So to tackle the factor of teammates, to tackle the factor of being able to work together, is something that I know is tough, because men and women together have a hard time coming to the understanding that there is no one thing. There is no absolute when it comes down to relationships. There's only the ebb and flow in staying in the now with one another and loving each other through the factors of what is and what is not a relationship. Understanding what to cut away from yourself, understanding exactly how it is that you are to operate. Now, here's the main factor that we all must focus on. The reason for divorce being the heaviest thing is not because we want to point at the woman or point at the man. No, that's a trick. That is a trick. The reason that divorce is so high is because we get into relationships with the expectation of not just perfection, but we get into relationships with the expectation that the other person is less human than us. We get into it with the expectation that they must be even more better than us in order to bring us up, versus understanding it is your personal responsibility in order to bring yourself up, so that not only that the other person can follow you, but because the leader in the relationship, not man or woman, but the leader in a relationship actually calls you to higher, right? So the question I have is, who do you follow? What do you follow in your life and relationship that may cause you and that man or you and that woman in order to fall by the wayside? What is it that you're doing? How is it that you're building yourself up? Are you developed in such a way, in such a facet where you believe that you have it all together? Because I promise you, you don't. There's always something to improve on. So how is it that you and your relationship begin to pull yourself up by your bootstraps? Well, I have an idea. Be a little less self-centered and be more selfless in the way that you operate with the person that you're with, because once you do that, you will realize that you yourself have a lot of flaws that also could be causing that person to be less than what you expected. It also could be causing that person to stumble or to fall into many different ways, because the relationship is not something that you run, is not something that you own, but it is something that you live and experience. The relationship is something that is. It is not something that needs to happen. It is something that already is. And if it's something you have to force, then you don't need to be in it. That's the main factor that so many people don't come with, is the factor of they start the relationship with failure already on the horizon, because they are not even supposed to be. So the question I have for you, are you with who you're meant to be with, or are you with the person that you made it happen with? If you made it happen, then it ain't meant to happen. If it's meant to happen, it don't got to be made. It's something that has to be accepted. The reality of love and relationships is the fact that love and relationships is not something that you yourself dictate. It is something that was created for you to be able to experience, versus you believing that you have the ability to be able to have some type of semblance of control over it. You don't. The only thing you have control over is yourself. This is why biblically in many other books, it talks about the effervescence of, if you will, self-control. Self-control is one of those things that I can say is the toughest thing to come about, because when you control yourself, that means that you're not putting the focus on controlling the other person. And if you put the focus on controlling yourself, then you have nothing but the ability to be your best, and not pulling the other person up through force, but pulling the other person up through the factor of spiritual effervescent and etrifical force, right? The power that you don't even know that you behold to help another person come up is by the life that you lead, not by the life that you push another person to do. Now imagine a life that you lead other people based upon the factor of how you operate, not just in the form of your action, but the fact that your words have the power due to the factor of the internal realness that you have. And when I talk about realness, I'm talking about being genuine. Marriage in itself is nothing to play with, and it's also nothing that is also something, it's also nothing that you have to do. It is something you have to be a part of. You have to make a choice that we're going to be married, and we are going to operate in the space of marriage as marriage is supposed to be. Everything already has an order. The sun has a way that it comes up. The moon has a way that it goes down. You didn't rewrite the book. You didn't write the book. You didn't create life. You can't even create a day if you really slow down to think how to create an entire day. You probably couldn't. You can probably only think about a couple of things, but you would miss things along the way. So that means as you are a part of your relationship, you also are a part of something that you never even created. So it behooves you to understand exactly what it is and exactly who it is and how it is that it is to be done, so that you can do it and go throughout your life living in freedom, versus trying to live a life where you control every single outcome. Because I promise you one thing, you don't. You'll never be able to control every outcome. The only thing that you can control in your relationships and in your life is yourself. I beg of you, my brothers and sisters, to do one thing for yourself, and that's one thing only. When it comes to you and your relationships, stop leaning on the factor of divorce and lean on the factor of doing the work within yourself to make sure that when you go to your partner to talk about something within that relationship that needs to be worked on and needs to be fixed, you're not coming to them as a person who is not doing what they're meant to do and supposed to do within themselves in order to hold accountability to another. Because if you do that, all you're doing is snatching the legs from under your relationship in order to hurry up and put it under another place before it falls. But if you build all the legs the way it's supposed to be, if you build your foundation the way it's supposed to be from the inside out, your relationship will never, ever fail. Love yourself. Love your partner as yourself. Give them everything. Submit yourself over to that person. But at the same time, never, ever stop working on who and what you're supposed to be. Chase your destiny. Peace.